And now a reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 1, verses 6 through 8, then 19 through 28. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you a prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing if you are neither the Messiah nor Elijah nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know. The one who is coming after me, I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. This is the gospel of our Lord. Thanks be to God.
Who are the greatest musical acts of all time? Well, if you go by record sales and number one hits, the first is the Beatles. Yep, they are number one. They will always be number one. Beatles are the best. I'm not saying that because I'm a huge fan and I keep John Lennon very close to my heart. No, it's just objective truth. It's in the number one sales. The number two musical acts of all time, if you go by sales and number one hits, is Mariah Carey. I find that really confusing because off the top of my head, I can't name more than two Mariah Carey songs, but yet somehow she has the second most number one hits. You'll Always Be My Baby, and of course, this time of year, All I Want for Christmas Is You. Those are the only two I know. But with how often I hear All I Want for Christmas Is You this time of year, that one by itself must have knocked it out of the charts. Everybody does a cover of this song.
There is just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true. All I want for Christmas.
So, the world has diversified to the point, technology has empowered to the point where we can all have our own musical libraries of 10,000 songs and have no songs in common. Meaning, I can know 10,000 songs by heart, and you can know 10,000 songs by heart, and us have nothing to talk about when it comes to music. Music as a reflection of culture shows that cultures are just becoming little bubble cultures. That there will be little groups who are really into this style of music. There are people who are really into this style of music, and then there's people like me who have never heard of the style of music. By the time I hear about a new genre of music, it's already 4 years old, and all the kids have moved on to something else. And that makes me sound like a grumpy old man, but that's the reality. We all have our own little sub-musical cultures. And it's important to recognize that culture really speaks to who we are, what we like, and even bigger, what we believe. A huge part of the New Testament is Paul trying to talk about the difference between culture and religion. Paul always declared himself that I am a Pharisee. I will be a Pharisee to the day I die, that I am culturally Jewish. I will participate in Jewish cultural celebrations, but that's different in worshiping Christ. That there are Gentiles who will celebrate Gentile cultural celebrations, and that's okay. Let them do it. He draws the line very vaguely of like, if your cultural celebration causes others to sin, or causes you to profane against God in vague and unclarified ways, then that's bad culture. But culture in and of itself isn't bad, but we should always recognize the difference between culture and faith. And that distinction's never more important than during Advent. Because culture tells us that Advent doesn't exist, it's Christmas. And Christmas has its own set of secular celebrations. For example, the number one musical hit of all time for Christmas music is Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas. And it does not mention Jesus. In fact, doesn't mention most of what Jesus at all. But it does use the word Christmas, so apparently that's Christmas. We have a secular Christmas filled with all of our traditions, and we have a church celebration of Advent. Now, cultural Christmas is not bad. Cultural celebrations are good in and of themselves. To say that cultural Christmas is bad would be to say Thanksgiving is bad. 4th of July is bad. Memorial Day is bad. Saying that secular celebrations are bad just misses the point. We have to have culture. We have to have ways to engage where we are and where we live. But to just embrace the cultural celebration without remembering, or at least taking time to remember, the church's perspective, well, that gets a little unhealthy. Point in case, when we go through and we look at our cultural telling of the Nativity story. Just a quick recap, because none of us see the Nativity story done by little kids this year. Or if we do, it's probably... Angel comes to Mary, pregnant. Angel comes to Joseph, and hey, she's pregnant, it's from God. Then they travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Angel shows up to tell the shepherds, up, they'll go home happily ever after. That makes us 4 Gospels and 3 different holidays, or church seasons rather, to make one story. For example, Angel comes to Mary in the Gospel of Luke only. Angel comes to Joseph in the Gospel of Matthew only. The 3 wise men, they show up in Matthew, and that's Epiphany, not Christmas. And even then, none of this story mentions John the Baptist, and Advent is all about John the Baptist.
I don't want a lot for Christmas. There's just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I don't need to hang my stocking there upon the fireplace, 'cause Santa Claus won't make me happy with a toy on Christmas Day. I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true, baby. All I want for Christmas is you.
So again, I want to reiterate that your cultural celebration of Christmas is great. It's wonderful. It's holy. It's righteous. It's good. You see cultural expression even in the Holy Bible. That's a really weird thing to say because the Holy Bible is, by its definition, religious, but different cultures came and contributed different stories. Let's look at the Nativity, for example. Mark skipped the Nativity. Didn't talk about it at all. Matthew has the Nativity. Mary and Joseph, they lived in Bethlehem. There was no census. There was nothing like that. In fact, it starts with a lineage from Adam all the way to Jesus. Then, in the Gospel of Luke, it starts before Jesus. It starts with the conception of John the Baptist. Then it goes to Jesus. Then it goes to the baptism. And John, finally, John starts at the beginning of time. In the beginning was the Word. Then after a quick run-through of the creation of the universe, it goes straight to John the Baptist, but there is no baptism. Now, each of these four Gospels had their own culture, their own audience that they were writing to. They had their own cultural points they wanted to make. Matthew, for example, he really wanted to connect Jesus to the Jewish culture of his day. He was the Jewish Messiah. That's why we start with the lineage. It's important that Jesus is descended from Adam. It's important that Jesus is descended from David, because those are Jewish concepts. And he really wanted to save his brothers and sisters and bring them into the Christian faith. Luke, on the other hand, he still wanted to connect the Jewish faith, but he also wanted to bring in more Roman and Gentile beliefs into the whole process as well. Now, this whole concept of the virgin birth, that connects to the Roman world. It's important to realize that Jesus isn't just for the Jews, it's for the whole world. If you go back to the prophecy in Isaiah, it doesn't say born to a virgin, it says born to a young woman. And good, faithful Jews would know that distinction and wouldn't be overly impressed by the virgin birth. It was a virgin birth. I'm not doubting that at all. But the inclusion of that is there to say to the Roman world, hey, this is something that you guys are into. Caesar was the son of Zeus. All of their kings and rulers were the sons of gods and mortal women. That this put Jesus on a level of hero in their book, and that's a cultural connection that they needed. So God provided. Then we get to John. John kind of throws all that convention out the window. He's trying to connect it to the Jewish faith. In fact, sometimes he comes across as almost anti-Semitic. He's not trying to connect it to the Roman authority of his day, because the Roman authority of his day didn't really like Christians that much. And he really wanted to distance himself from the Jewish traditions, because in the time that John was writing his gospel, there was a persecution against the Jews. And a lot of times Christians would get caught up in that because it was a fair mistake to make in the late first century. So John, in our gospel reading today, is trying to establish something new. It's really interesting. Here we have John the Baptist. And he's about to have his brief ministry in the Gospel of John. And it looks way different than what we expect.
I won't ask for much this Christmas. I don't even wish for snow. I'm just gonna keep on waiting underneath a mistletoe, and I won't make a list and send it to the North Pole for St. Nick. I won't even stay awake to hear those magic reindeer click, 'cause I just want you here tonight, holding on to me so tight. What more can I do? Baby, all I want for Christmas.
So again, as the rest of the world and our families are celebrating Christmas, the church is in Advent, the time of preparation. And who is the one that prepares the way of the Lord? John the Baptist. That's why Advent isn't about Jesus. Advent is more about John the Baptist. And as we look at the four Gospels and what they have to say about John the Baptist, it's fascinating how his role changes over time. In the early beginnings with like Mark, who was the first gospel to be written, and Luke and Matthew shortly after, John the Baptist was a big deal. He was a big deal. He was this prophet that stood out amongst prophets because, let's be honest, the wilderness has always attracted the end of the world types. I'm from Western South Dakota. In Western South Dakota, we have the #1 manufacturer of bomb fallout shelters. And there is always some sort of weird apocalyptic cult in the middle of the wilderness out in the Black Hills. It's just a thing. You have wilderness, there they go. At the time of John the Baptist, there were several apocalyptic creatures in the wilderness, John stands out. John is the one we remember. Even though first century apocalyptic prophet was a whole genre and motif back in his day, he's the only one that survives. And he survives because he's the only one that was right. Mark and Luke and Matthew build this tension. John the Baptist was the one that all the Jewish communities remembered, even more so than Jesus. So they had to engage in that a lot more than John did. They had to define his role and really clarify his role. Luke says that an angel comes to John's father and says, he will be Elijah. He's going to have the power of a prophet. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus actually calls John the Baptist, you are my Elijah. Then we get to John. And the witness of John the Baptist is one that points towards the light. He was with the light, but he was not the light. The scholars and the legalists come to him and say, are you a prophet? And he says, no, I'm not a prophet. No, that contradicts Luke. They say, are you Elijah? And he says, I am not Elijah. That contradicts Matthew. So who is this guy? He's the guy that points the way to Jesus. Now, this is something that really blew my mind because when I took my first New Testament studies course, they said all the Gospels have baptisms, all of them have crucifixions, all of them have resurrections. And that was incorrect. If you go through and read the Gospel of John, there's no baptism. He says that John saw the dove descend upon Jesus, but it doesn't say that he baptized him. Because there's this tension, and you feel it even in the other Gospels. John had a very specific form of baptism. I baptize for the repentance of sin. Then why would Jesus get baptized? Mark and Matthew and Luke, they grapple with that tension. They try to go through and explain it away. They try to connect John and Jesus because the cultures they were speaking into needed that connection. John's didn't. So he just didn't even touch it. Didn't even go there. Instead, he proclaimed the goodness of Jesus. He proclaimed the divinity of Jesus. The Gospel of John is what gives us the foundation of the Trinity. There is this movement. I'm pretty sure all of you guys still probably have the wristband. The WWJD. What would Jesus do? I've always thought that was a silly question. There are people who are starving right now due to the pandemic. What would Jesus do? Feed them. He would take his 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed. There we go. Problem solved. I don't have the power to do that. That's above my pay grade. WWJD is speculative. He was the Son of God. We aren't that. Now, a better question would be WWJT. What would John do?
All the lights are shining so brightly everywhere, and the sound of children's laughter fills the air, and everyone is singing. I hear those sleigh bells ringing. Santa, won't you bring me the one I really need? Won't you please bring my baby to me? Oh, I don't want a lot for Christmas. This is all I'm asking for. I just want to see my baby standing right outside my door. I want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true, baby. All I want for Christmas is you.
So what would John the Baptist do? Scary question. First thing that comes to mind is, well, John the Baptist would change his wardrobe. He'd get himself some nice camel hair, a leather belt, and some tasty locusts with honey. No, I'm not saying what would John the Baptist do. We shouldn't ask that in a literal sense. Don't go to the wilderness and start baptizing people. No, instead, do what his point was. The job of John the Baptist was to prepare the way for the one to come, to set the ground, to get people to a position where they could hear the good news. Because people aren't born ready for that. They got to get prepped. They got to be in a place where they can hear it and they can understand it. The classic social justice commentary is, you can't hear the good news over the sound of a grumbling tummy. So, the purpose of a herald is to, like it says in the gospel reading, make straight the way, lift up the valleys, level out the mountains, prepare the way. And we try to do that with our ministries. That's the whole point, is to get people to the point where they aren't so scared and worried about their life that they can actually open themselves up to hope and joy and goodness. It's not that we do this quid pro quo thing. Hey, we'll feed you if you believe in Jesus. We will march with you if you let us baptize you. No, we improve their lives because that way they will be more open. To get more specific, it's hard to say, what would this person who lived 2,000 years ago, who spoke a different language of a different culture, of a radically different worldview, what would he do? Speculation. Instead, think of it like this. Be everyone's grandma. Hard job, fun job, right? There are so many people my age who left church, but they always tell stories of Christmas Eve, they would always go to church with grandma. There's one church that's very special to them because grandma always took them on Christmas Eve. Now, it's distressing to think that, they only went because of grandma. They weren't there for Jesus, they were there for grandma. However, grandma's job was done right. Grandma's job was there to prepare them the way. Grandma did the job of getting them to church to show them what Christ was like. Have you ever met a grandma who didn't feed you? Have you ever met a grandma who didn't do everything she could to make your life better and more joyful? To teach you. It's your parents' job to do all that hard stuff. It's grandma's job to make sure that you thrive. It's grandma's job to make sure that you experience joy. It's grandma's job to get you to church and teach you about Jesus, right? And it's so sad that so oftentimes we mistake that dedication from our grandparents and miss that connection to Christ. My own grandmother always took us to the Rochford Chapel, the little brown church in the wood. It is not about Nashville, Iowa, I promise. And every Sunday we had to sing the Little Brown Church in the Vale, and it is still one of my favorite hymns. I could still sing it every Sunday. But now that I can't go back to Rochford at Christmas, pandemic or not, I'm still working Christmas Eve. Do I think Grandma would be mad at me for not going to that church? No. Grandma would be very proud of me that I'm going to a church. Grandma's proud of me that because she showed me the way, I know Christ. That she laid that groundwork. So as you go about your traditional Christmas, as you gather with family, if you can do it safely, remember what's underneath all that. Remember the spiritual reason why we're there. Remember the Christ that Grandma was taking us to see. It's really hard to take that time because our traditional secular Christmas takes up all of our effort, all of our energies, and all of our time. With our church doors closed due to the pandemic, but Walmart's still open, it's even harder to remember that. So take the time. Take the time to remember what John the Baptist did, how he prepared the way. Remember how your grandmother, and this is almost universal, I'm sorry if your grandmother didn't have this relationship with you. If she didn't, talk to me. I have a church full of grandmothers who will take over that role for you. But remember the faith that your grandparents tried to show you, the joy that they found, and how that was so joyful, they wanted to share it with you. Like John the Baptist, they were just witnesses pointing the way. So now it's our turn to go out and be witnesses and point people the way of Christ.